1960s, a new type of war began in Washington state. Rather than using soldiers to battle, nets were cast. Fish Wars was a series of protests spanning between the 1960s and 70s that included revolts known as fish-ins. This led to a direct reaction of Native nations in Washington who fought to force the state to uphold treaties which guarantee Native rights to fish in usual and customary fishing sites outside of tribal borders. Our historical argument is how the Washington State Fish Wars were revolts sparked by treaty right violations that fueled a legal revolution ending in the Boldt decision, ultimately reforming environmental policy and changing the fish industry.
The right to fish was given to us by the Creator, were the words of lifetime Lummi fisherwoman Heather Jefferson when asked about what fishing means to her. While most people see Fish Wars as a fight for Native rights to their tribal lands, it was more than that. It was a revolution for Native people to reclaim a way of life, to take back a treaty right that was promised to them centuries ago.
Conflicts started to rise as Washington State began to restrict Native American fishing rights. Many new industries like sport and commercial fishing grew and started to take over the land and fish that the natives were promised in the 1855 Treaty of Medicine Creek, and many other treaties which took their land in exchange for fishing in their typical areas. Soon after the treaty was violated, violence and arrests began to come forth as Native Americans were criminalized for not having fishing permits and the correct nets. Pete Granger, a lifetime fisherman, spoke about how this was during the time of Martin Luther King Jr. and his nonviolent demonstrations, which inspired the tribes to react and fight for their rights. When the natives protested in revolts called fish-ins, they were reciprocated with violence and many were arrested and harassed. The government also came to the conclusion that the decrease in salmon and fish populations was due to native fishing and solely blamed them, causing frustration and a fabricated reason to restrict the fish limits. Actions of great consequence occurred, some of which were boat rammings, gunshots, and even deaths and hospitalizations.
Tensions rose between native and non-tribal fishers in the mid-60s when the peak of the fish-ins took place. Ramona Bennett, a Puyallup tribal elder who was at the Puyallup River riot, one of the largest revolts at the time, recalls police violence, stating that, and they just came down on us, and they came with gas masks, in regards to the police storming the encampment and arresting over 60 adults and children. The police fought violently, going as far as tear gassing, clubbing, and shooting innocent protesters. Ramona Bennett would later go on to be elected as Puyallup tribal chairwoman in 1971.
Billy Frank Jr., perhaps the most known figure to come from Fish Wars, was born in March of 1931. Billy grew up fishing on the Nisqually River near Frank's Landing. His love of fishing led to his first arrest when he was 14 for quote-unquote illegal fishing on his native land. He would become one of the leaders of the fish-ins during the 60s and 70s. After his first arrest, he would go on to be arrested over 50 more times in his life. Frank Jr. was a dominant organizer for fish-ins over the years.
The Boldt decision, while widely hailed as the end of Fish Wars, it certainly wasn't the first case to arguing for native fishing rights. Early in the 40s and 50s, many court decisions remained mixed. Cases such as State of Washington v. Staticum, which affirmed native rights to fish in accustomed grounds as long as there was no threat to the conservation of fish, which many felt was a buzzword to allow the government to remain in control of native rights to fish. Native rights were once again limited by the 1968 case Puyallup Tribe v. Department Game of Washington, which it was ruled that the state had the ability to regulate tribal fishing rights as much as they saw fit for the sake of conservation, even though it seemed more to be a decision for control of rights and not the conservation of fish.
On February 12, 1974, Judge George Boldt sided with Native tribes as he affirmed tribal nations reserved treaty rights to fish. The trial was long and grueling, lasting over 3 weeks straight with no breaks for Labor Day weekend. The decision confirmed Native rights to fish in common with other sport fishermen and commercial. They also were affirmed rights to the half of the salmon catch. The Bolt decision passing was landmark reform for Native fishing rights. It faced years of negative reactions from non-tribal fishermen.
Originally, no one really took the decision seriously, thinking that it would just get overturned within a year. And when non-tribal fishermen realized the bill would stand, it's safe to say they were nothing short of outraged. Bolt himself received most of the hate, specifically hate mail. He once said in an interview with the New York Times that he received bales and bales of mail, loathsome material. Non-natives protested the reform for years. Many flat out ignored the ruling and continued to fish wherever they wanted. In an interview we did with lifetime non-tribal fisherman Jim Bogmart, he said he felt that the Bolt decision actually separated the fishermen, saying the judge separated them. The court decision caused the split and caused selective fishing between everyone. Many other commercial and sport fishermen took a more active stance against this decision, specifically Judge Bolt himself. Outside the Tacoma courthouse, Judge Bolt was hung in effigy. Even now, 52 years since the passing of the Bolt decision, Native people are still not able to fish in peace. Native fisherwoman Rebecca Padilla recalls the time her nets were cut when trying to gillnet fish. They just kept coming. They told us we shouldn't be fishing, and then when we wouldn't leave, they would go on their boats and cut our net.
Specifically in Whatcom County, students and community members are encouraged to join work parties with groups like the NSEA, which plants native trees near salmon habitats. Many schools have projects like hatching salmon to allow students to learn more about what they do for the environment. The fish wars have impacted Washington state communities in so many ways. There is so much growth in the salmon population than from it when it first started depleting. From the rivers to the courtrooms, what began as an act of justice sparked a revolution, ultimately reforming the promises prior to the war. Without the reactions and perseverance of many determined Native Americans in Washington state, others in the country would have struggled over their treaties, the environment as we know it would deteriorate, and major economic poverty would have occurred. Billy Frank Jr. once said that the fish war isn't over. Instead of fighting over fish, we are fighting for the fish, to keep them on this planet. As we leave you today, we encourage you to ponder how you can help Pacific Northwest in its road to recovery and save the environment that shaped our state.
To keep the course that we're on. We're managers and we stay the course, but it takes a long time to kind of turn the ship the right way to manage the resource, and we have to do that. So we have to work together, all of us. We have to come to the table and try to figure it out. What is happening here? But I have hope. Indian tribes will always be managers. We have to be managers. There's no other way.